This is a fictional, dramatized story inspired by real emotions, and every character and event here is imagined.
The screenshot on my phone looked harmless at first. Like any other family message you scroll past while your coffee cools. One line, one little sentence, time-stamped from last October. Sitting there in the blue bubble as it had always belonged. I had saved it without thinking. The way you save something sharp without realizing it will keep cutting you later. I was standing in my kitchen in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, watching the morning light slide across the counter, when I opened it again and felt my stomach tighten the same way it had in the hospital. Because the sentence wasn't dramatic, it wasn't even angry. It was casual. That was the part that made it worse. Don't be a burden. I remember staring at those words and hearing the beeping from the monitors in my head, like my body still hadn't gotten the memo that the emergency was over. The night they sent it. I was in the ER with a nurse pressing a warm blanket into my hands, telling me to keep breathing slowly while a doctor explained that they needed to take me into surgery sooner than planned. It wasn't a long speech. It was a few clean, careful sentences, the kind people use when they're trying not to scare you. But I was scared anyway, not because of the procedure. Not really. I was scared because I was alone. And for a moment, I believed that if I called my parents, they would show up, not as decision makers or judges, but as two people who could stand at the edge of a hallway and be there. I called. My mom answered on the second ring, her voice bright, already half turned away. I heard music in the background and the muffled rush of a crowd. When I asked where they were, she said, like it was obvious, that they were on their way out the door with my sister. Brooke had tickets to a concert she'd been excited about for months. I said, quietly, I'm going into surgery. There was a pause, just long enough for me to imagine the right outcome. Then my dad's voice cut in, annoyed, as if I'd interrupted something important. He said I was making it about me. He said Brooke had been looking forward to this. He said, we can't drop everything. And then the group chat message appeared, as if someone had decided to put the family's values in writing, so there could be no confusion later. Don't guilt trip us. Stop being dramatic. Don't be a burden. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just felt something in me go very still, the way a door closes softly when you finally stop pushing. 2 weeks later, at a family birthday dinner, that same message would be read out loud, and the room would change in a way no one could undo. Type, I see you. If you've ever been treated like the strong one until you finally weren't. If you had met my family in a grocery store or at church, you would have thought we were normal, maybe even warm. My parents knew how to smile at the right moments. They knew how to ask the polite questions and laugh at the polite jokes. They were the kind of people who brought a casserole when someone was sick, who mailed birthday cards to neighbors, who said things like, we just want our girls to be happy. But inside our house, happiness had a ranking system. It always had. My name is Evelyn, but everyone calls me Evie, and I am 33 years old. I work as an ICU nurse, which means I spend my days watching the line between panic and control. I am good at staying calm when other people fall apart. In my family. That skill got repurposed into something else. It became my role. Brooke, my older sister, is 36, and she has always been the bright, exciting one, the fun daughter, the one my mother introduced first. Brooke was the story they told at parties. Brooke was in the photo on the fridge. Brooke was the reason plans changed. When Brooke wanted something, it was framed as a need. When I needed something, it was framed as an inconvenience. My dad, Richard, used to call me practical, like it was a compliment, and for a long time, I believed him. My mom, Linda, called me strong, which sounded loving until I realized strong was just another word for disposable. If you can take it, people will keep handing it to you. I was the one who handled paperwork. I was the one who stayed late. I was the one who said, "It is fine," even when it was not. I did not think of my parents as cruel. I still do not. That is what made everything confusing. They did not scream. They did not throw things. They did not hit. They just made 1,000 tiny choices that always landed the same way, toward Brooke, away from me. And because they never called it favoritism, I spent years wondering if the problem was my sensitivity, my expectations, or my inability to be grateful. I kept looking for the version of myself that would finally fit in their hands. The favoritism was never one dramatic moment. It was a timeline, and the timeline had receipts. The first milestone I cannot forget happened in May of 2016 in Columbus, Ohio. The day I graduated from nursing school, I had invited my parents months in advance. I even offered to pay for their hotel because I knew money made them tense, and I did not want stress to be the excuse. They promised they would be there. I remember standing in my cap and gown, scanning the crowd while names were called, trying not to look desperate. When my name finally echoed through the auditorium, I walked across the stage and accepted my diploma with a smile that felt like it belonged to someone else. My parents were not in their seats. They arrived almost an hour later, breathless, holding iced coffees as they had simply misjudged traffic. My mother hugged me quickly and said, "We are so sorry. Evie, Brooke had a last-minute thing and she needed us." My father patted my shoulder and said, "You know how she is." They took one photo of me in a hallway. No dinner, no flowers. No, "We are proud of you." Just a rushed goodbye because Brooke was waiting in the car. I told myself it was fine. I told myself grown-ups do not need applause. The second milestone happened 7 years later, in September of 2023, and that was when the illusion finally cracked. Brooke had gotten divorced, and my parents treated it like a national emergency. They flew to Nashville for 2 weeks to stay with her, stocked her fridge, took her out every night, posted photos of the three of them smiling on Broadway, as if heartbreak was a family vacation. Meanwhile, I was working double shifts in the ICU and trying to schedule a surgery I had been putting off for months. It was not cosmetic. It was not optional. My doctor had been clear about that. When I called my mother and asked if they could help by simply being on standby the day of the procedure, she sighed like I was asking her to move furniture. "Evie, you will be fine. You are always fine. Brooke is fragile right now. Your sister needs us more." I remember holding my phone and staring at the wall in my break room, listening to her say it like it was the most logical thing in the world. That was the moment I stopped wondering if I was imagining it. I was not. I had just been trained to accept it. And once you see a pattern clearly, you cannot unsee it.
If you have ever been the reliable one in your family, the one who gets overlooked because you can handle it, tell me you know that feeling.
I did not just accept being overlooked. I financed it. That is the part that still makes my stomach tighten when I think about it. because I was not a child when the money started. I was a grown woman with a steady paycheck and a very clear understanding of what my parents expected from me. It began in late 2017, about a year after my graduation, when my dad called me one evening and said he needed a small favor. His voice had that careful edge, the one he used when he wanted something, but did not want to feel ashamed for asking. Evie, we are just in a tight spot this month. The mortgage is due, and there have been some unexpected expenses. Could you help us? Just this once? I transferred the money that night. It was not even a debate. They were my parents. I told myself I was being responsible. I told myself it was temporary. But just this once became every month, so quietly that I almost did not notice the shift until it was permanent. The mortgage payment was $2,100. Then there was their health insurance premium when my dad decided early retirement made more sense than staying at a job he hated. Then there were the little emergencies that always arrived with urgency and guilt attached. A new water heater, a car repair, a credit card balance they needed to clear before it became a problem. Every time, they asked like it was an exception, and every time, I said yes like it was love. The cruelest part was that they never demanded it outright. They did not threaten me. They did not scream. They simply leaned on the version of me they had raised. The practical daughter. The strong daughter. The one who does not complain. I started setting up automatic transfers because it was easier than hearing my mother's voice get thin and disappointed. It was easier than my father's silence when he felt judged. It was easier than the familiar line, "You know, Brooke cannot help right now. She has so much going on." And for years, I believed I was paying for their stability. I thought I was protecting them. I did not realize I was also protecting the story they wanted the world to see. That they were comfortable. That they were generous. That they had raised two daughters who adored them. The money was not the only thing I gave them. I gave them my quiet. I gave them my dignity. I gave them the benefit of the doubt, month after month, while I watched them spend freely on Brooke without ever calling it what it was. When Brooke wanted a weekend trip to reset after her divorce, my parents booked flights. When I needed help scheduling a surgery, I was told I was being dramatic. That was when something in me shifted from grief into something steadier, not anger, not revenge, just clarity. I opened my laptop and started a spreadsheet. Not to punish them, to stop lying to myself. The concert night was supposed to be simple. In February of 2024, I had finally scheduled the surgery I had postponed for nearly a year. A procedure my doctor described as routine but necessary, the kind of thing you do before it turns into a crisis. I live in a small townhouse outside Dublin, Ohio, and I had arranged everything like I always did. I had meal prepped. I had clean sheets on the bed. I had my discharge instructions printed. I had even set alarms on my phone for medication times, because I do not like relying on anyone when I can rely on planning. The only thing I could not plan was the moment my body decided to stop cooperating. That afternoon, I started feeling lightheaded while folding laundry. At first, I told myself it was nerves. Then the cramping hit, sharp enough that I had to sit down on the floor. I checked my phone. It was 3:18 p.m. My surgery was scheduled for the next morning, but the pain did not care about the calendar. I tried to stand and nearly collapsed. That was when I called my surgeon's office, and the nurse on the line told me, very calmly, to go to the emergency room. Not later. Now. I drove myself because that is what I do. I parked in the garage at Ohio Health Riverside, walked in bent slightly at the waist, and smiled at the triage desk like I was not terrified. The ER is a strange place when you are usually the one wearing scrubs. The sounds are the same, but your skin feels thinner. A nurse took my vitals, and her eyes sharpened. They moved me back quickly. A CT scan. Blood work. The kind of waiting that makes minutes feel personal. When the doctor finally came in, he did not sit. He stood at the foot of the bed and said, "We need to admit you. Tonight. There is more bleeding than we want to see." I stared at him, trying to translate his tone into certainty. I asked the only question that mattered. "Is it dangerous?" he said. "It can become dangerous. We would rather act before it does." I nodded like a professional and felt my hands start to shake like a child. That was the shock. Not the pain, not the hospital. The realization that I might not be going home, that I might be waking up alone. I grabbed my phone and called my mother. She did not answer. I called my father. He answered on the third ring. Already irritated, like my timing was inconvenient. "Evie, we are on our way downtown to the arena." "What is it?" I told him where I was. I told him I was being admitted and might need surgery sooner than planned. I asked if he and my mom could come, not even to stay, just to sit with me for a little while, to be present. There was a pause. Then I heard my mother's voice in the background, bright and excited, saying something about seats and parking. My dad covered the phone and said, "Linda." "It's Evie." I heard my mother sigh, long and theatrical. Then my father came back on the line and said, "Honey, we cannot tonight. We already bought tickets. Brooke has been looking forward to this for months. I thought I misheard him." I said, "Dad, I am in the ER," he said. "You are in good hands. You work there. You know how this goes." And then, as if to make it feel more reasonable, he added, "We will call you tomorrow." My phone buzzed a moment later with a message in the family group chat. From my mother. "Please do not make this about you tonight. Brooke needs a win." I stared at the words until they blurred. A few minutes later, the doctor returned and told me the on-call team had reviewed my scan. We were moving forward now. I understood. In one clean flash, that for the first time in my life, I was not asking for too much. I was asking the wrong people.
If you have ever realized in one sentence that your family was never going to show up for you, tell me you know what that feels like.
The message did not stop there. While I lay in a curtained ER bay with an IV in my arm, my phone kept lighting up like the universe wanted me to see every layer of it. My father texted privately a few minutes later, "Do not overreact. Your mother is stressed, and Brooke has been through a lot." Then Brooke herself sent a selfie from the car, her makeup perfect, her mouth pursed in a playful smile. And underneath it, she wrote, "You are literally a nurse. Evie, you will be fine." I stared at that photo until my throat tightened. Not because it was cruel in an obvious way, but because it was casual. It was the kind of casual you use when you are certain someone will always absorb the impact for you. A nurse I recognized from my unit stepped in to check my vitals and paused when she saw my face. "You okay?" I nodded because I did not know how to explain that the pain in my body was manageable. But the pain of being dismissed was something I had been carrying for decades. I turned my phone face down and tried to breathe. Then the doctor returned with my lab results, and his tone shifted from cautious to firm. "We are taking you to surgery tonight. Not in the morning. Tonight." The room went strangely quiet after that, like my brain muted everything except the words I did not want to hear. I asked about recovery time. I asked about risk. I asked about work. I asked questions the way people ask questions when they are trying to stay in control of something they cannot control. When the doctor left, I opened my banking app. I do not know why that was my instinct, but I think I finally understood what my family had trained me to do. When I felt afraid, I paid. When I felt lonely, I paid. When I felt guilty, I paid. Money was how I kept the peace. Money was how I bought the illusion that I still belonged. I scrolled through 8 years of transfers, and there it was, as regular as breathing: mortgage, insurance, repairs, emergency. Always one direction. Always from me to them. I remembered my mother's message: "Please do not make this about you tonight." And I realized I had been making it not about me for my entire life. That was the moment the decision happened. It was not dramatic. It was not a speech. It was a quiet click of a button. I canceled the automatic transfers. All of them. Then I went into my phone settings and blocked my parents' numbers. I blocked Brooks, too. Not as punishment, as protection. I needed my nervous system to survive the next few hours without their voices in it. When the nurse returned to wheel me toward pre-op, she asked if anyone was coming to sit with me. I said, "No, but I am not alone." And for the first time, I meant it. Because in that sterile hallway under fluorescent lights, I finally felt the weight leave my shoulders. The weight of trying to earn love from people who only valued me when I was useful. If you have ever stopped paying for peace and felt your whole body exhale, stay with me. Because the part that came next surprised even me. I spent 2 nights in the hospital and went home, sore, exhausted, and strangely calm. The surgery went well, the kind of outcome doctors call uncomplicated. Even though nothing feels uncomplicated when you wake up with stitches and silence. I did not hear from my parents. I did not hear from Brooke. The absence was almost louder than their words. On the 3rd day, my phone rang from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something in me answered. "Evie, it is Aunt Marlene, my mother's older sister." We were not close in the everyday sense, but she was the only adult in my childhood who ever looked at me like she saw the whole picture. She did not ask how my mother was doing. She asked how I was, and when I told her the short version, her voice went quiet in a way that made me sit down. "I know," she said. "I know more than you think." She told me my mother had been calling relatives all weekend, crying, saying I had lost my mind after surgery, that I was being cruel and ungrateful, that I had cut them off for no reason. The story was already being written without me in it. Marlene did not sound shocked. She sounded tired. "Honey," she said, "you have been carrying them for years. People just did not know how literal that was." I did not ask how she knew. I already had a feeling. Then she said, "I want to come by this weekend. Not to lecture you. To help you. And I want to bring someone." His name is Glenn Porter. He is retired now, but he used to be a CPA. He did taxes for half this town for 35 years. He is also my friend. And he does not play games with numbers. My first instinct was to say no, I did not want this to become a war. But Marlene said something that made my throat tighten. Evie, the truth is not an attack. It is a boundary. They have been counting on your silence. Let us take that away from them. 2 days later, Marlene showed up at my townhouse with a grocery bag of soup containers and a manila folder tucked under her arm, like she had been born holding evidence. Glenn was in his 70s, polite, neat, and quiet, with the kind of calm you only see in people who have spent their lives listening to other people panic. They sat at my kitchen table while I made tea, and I brought out my laptop. I opened the spreadsheet I had started months earlier, the one I had been too ashamed to show anyone. Glenn did not gasp. He did not judge. He just asked questions. When did it start? How often? Where did the money go? Did you ever write anything in the memo lines? Did they pay you back? I answered, and he typed. Then he asked for my bank statements. I logged in and printed the transfer history. Page after page slid out of my printer like a confession I had never spoken aloud. When we finished, Glenn leaned back and said, "All right, now it is clear." Marlene reached into her folder and pulled out an invitation. My mother's birthday dinner is next Saturday. A restaurant in downtown Columbus. Private room. 30 relatives. She smiled without warmth. Your mother wants a perfect family photo. Let us give her one. Not with yelling, not with drama, just with facts. Glenn nodded once. I will come, and I will bring a summary. I stared at them, my heart beating too fast. I did not want to embarrass anyone. Marlene squeezed my hand. Then do not embarrass them, she said. Just stop protecting them.
If you want to know what it feels like when the truth finally enters the room, do not go anywhere.
The dinner did not end in shouting. That is the part people always assume. They imagine a scene, a meltdown, someone storming out. What actually happened was quieter and, in a way, harder to dismiss. Glenn stood up in that private restaurant room while my mother held court at the head of the table, laughing too loudly, telling everyone how worried she had been about me. My father nodded along. Brooke sat beside her in a sleek black dress, checking her phone as none of it mattered. When Glenn introduced himself as Marlene's guest, my mother smiled automatically, the way she smiled at anyone she could not categorize. Marlene simply said she had asked him to speak for her. Then Glenn placed a single stapled packet on the table. He did not accuse anyone. He did not call names. He said, I was asked to summarize a pattern of financial support. And I did. He read 3 numbers: the monthly mortgage payment, the insurance premium, the total amount over the better part of 7 years. The room did not erupt. It simply went still. People looked down at the packet. People looked up at my parents. My father's face changed in small increments, like a mask slipping. My mother's smile froze. Brooke stopped scrolling. And I sat there with my hands folded in my lap, not triumphant, just hollow, because the truth was finally visible and it did not feel like victory. It felt like oxygen. My mother tried to speak, but Marlene said, Linda, no. Not yet. Let the facts stand first. Then Glenn read the text message calmly. As part of the record, the one telling me not to make it about me because Brooke needed a win. That was when the room shifted. Not toward punishment, but toward recognition. An uncle cleared his throat. A cousin whispered, Evie. I had no idea. My father stared at his plate. My mother's eyes filled with tears, but they were not the gentle tears she performed for sympathy. They were panicked. The dinner ended early, not with a dramatic exit, but with my parents suddenly saying they were tired and needed to go. A week later, the audacity returned. My father called from a number I did not recognize and left a voicemail. "Evie, we need to talk. The mortgage company sent a notice. You cannot just cut us off like that. Your mother is sick with stress. This has gone too far." He did not apologize. He negotiated. 2 days after that, Brooke texted from a new number. "Can you please just send them something for now? They are embarrassed." I stared at the screen for a long time before I replied with one sentence. "I am not your family's emergency fund anymore." Then I blocked that number too. The consequences were not instant karma. They were practical. Within 2 months, my parents listed their house. Within 3, they moved into a small rental. My father took a part-time job. My mother started bookkeeping for a church. It was not cruel, it was reality. It was, and for the first time, reality was not being softened by my paycheck.
If someone ever called your pain too expensive, I hope you never forget what you're worth.
Healing did not arrive like a movie ending. There was no scene where my parents showed up at my door with a handwritten letter and suddenly became different people. There was no moment where Brooke broke down and admitted everything she had enjoyed for years. What happened instead was quieter, slower, and, in a strange way, more honest. The first month after the dinner, I kept expecting to feel guilty every time I checked my bank account. I expected shame to rise up the way it always had. But the guilt did not come. What came was relief. And then grief. Because relief is often just grief with room to breathe. I grieved the family I had been trying to buy. I grieved the version of my parents who would have sat beside my hospital bed simply because I was their daughter. I grieved the years I spent calling myself strong when what I really was trained. I started therapy in April of 2024 not because I thought I was broken, but because I wanted to stop repeating the same pattern in every other part of my life. The therapist said something in our second session that landed like a diagnosis. You were taught that love equals labor. That if you stop working, you stop being worthy. I sat there in silence because it was so obvious once someone said it out loud. At work, I began saying no to extra shifts without explaining myself. I stopped volunteering to fix everyone's problems. I started taking my days off as they belonged to me. I reworked my budget and watched the money that used to disappear into my parents' house turn into something steady and forward-facing, a real emergency fund, a retirement contribution, a savings account for the life I wanted, not the life they demanded. Aunt Marlene became the family member I did not know I was allowed to have. She texted me every Sunday with a simple question. "How is your heart this week?" Glenn checked in, too, in his quiet way, sending me articles about boundaries and money like he was still doing my taxes. My parents stayed at a distance. Sometimes my mother would try to send a message through a cousin, something vague like, "We miss you. We hope you are well." There was never a clear apology. There was never a sentence that said, "We were wrong." I learned to stop waiting for that sentence, like it was a key to my peace. Peace did not require their permission. 6 months after the surgery, I ran into my father at a hardware store where he was working the register. He looked older, tired. He asked how I was, and I answered politely. He said, "Your mother is having a hard time." I looked at him and said, "I am not punishing her. I am protecting myself." He nodded, not in agreement, but in resignation, like he was finally seeing the boundary as something real. I walked out of the store and sat in my car for a long time, not shaking, not furious, just quiet, because for the first time in my life, my peace did not depend on being chosen. It depended on choosing myself.